Have you ever just stopped and really thought about what it means to know something? I mean, really. We're about to dive into one of the biggest questions out there. How do we actually know what we think we know?
All right, let's start with something super simple. How do you know you have hands? No, really, go ahead. Look at them. You can see them, you can feel them, you can wiggle your fingers. It feels like the most obvious fact in the entire world, right?
Well, for philosophers, this little question, it cracks open a whole universe of problems. That feeling of just total certainty you have about your own hands, turns out it might not be nearly as solid as it feels.
Okay, so to figure this all out, let's start at the beginning. Let's look at the classic, old-school recipe for knowledge, a formula that thinkers have been using for thousands of years. Here it is, the gold standard, straight from the time of Plato. For you to know something, you need 3 ingredients. First, you have to actually believe it. Makes sense? Second, that belief has to be true. Can't know something that's false. And third, you need a good reason for it. You need justification. Belief, truth, justification. That's the recipe. Seems pretty straightforward, doesn't it? Well, yeah, for about 2,000 years, that's what pretty much everyone thought. But then a simple little thought experiment came along and basically broke the whole thing. Let's call it the story of the clock that broke knowledge. Okay, picture this. You're late for a super important meeting. You're rushing through some building you've never been in before and you're panicking about the time. You glance up at the wall and you see a big, classic-looking clock. The clock says 11:55. Whew, okay, 5 minutes to spare. So let's check our recipe. Do you believe it's 11:55? Yes. Is your belief justified? Totally. You look at a clock. And here's the crazy part. By some wild 1 in a million coincidence, it actually is 11:55. So, all 3 boxes are ticked. You have knowledge, right? Nope. You don't know the time. You just got incredibly lucky. You formed your belief based on a broken clock that just happened to be right at that exact moment. This kind of problem, it's called a Gettier case, and it threw a massive wrench in the works of philosophy. It proved our simple recipe was missing something really important. Justified true belief on its own just wasn't enough. So it was back to the drawing board. One of the first major attempts to fix this problem was to say, okay, what if we just make sure our justifications are built on something absolutely 100% certain? And this idea is called foundationalism. The best way to think about it is to picture your knowledge like a giant building. Every single belief has to be supported by another belief below it, which is supported by another, all the way down until you hit bedrock, an unshakable foundation of things you know for sure, like I exist or I am thinking. Everything else gets built on top of that. But not everybody was sold on the whole building idea. I mean, what if we don't need a single solid foundation at all? What if knowledge is less like a building and more like a spider's web? This brings us to coherentism. In this view, a belief is justified not because it sits on some fundamental truth, but because it fits perfectly with all your other beliefs. It's the way everything connects and supports everything else that creates justification. It's all about the network. So let's put these 2 ideas head to head. Foundationalism is like a fortress. It demands a solid, unshakable starting point. If that foundation cracks, the whole thing comes crashing down. Coherentism, on the other hand, is like that web. Its strength comes from all the connections. No single belief is the most important. Instead, the whole system holds itself up. It's a really fundamental disagreement about where our certainty actually comes from. But then some other philosophers came along and said, hey, wait a minute. What if we're all looking at this the wrong way? Maybe it's not about the structure of our beliefs at all. Maybe it's about the process we use to get them. And this leads us to a much more modern idea called externalism. Specifically a version of it known as process reliabilism. Here's the key idea. Knowledge is a true belief that was created by a reliable process. Think of it like a well-oiled machine designed to spit out truth. It doesn't really matter if you know exactly how the machine works on the inside. All that matters is, does it work? You can almost see it like a flowchart. You start with some input, data from the world, like light hitting your eyes when you see a clock. That data goes through a process. And if that process is reliable, meaning you have healthy vision, and this is the important part, the clock is actually working, then the output is a true belief that actually counts as knowledge. It's a clean input-process-output system. And this brings us right back to our broken clock. Why wasn't it knowledge, even though it was a justified true belief? Simple. The process, getting your information from a stopped clock, is totally unreliable. It fails the test. This idea, externalism, gives us a really clean, powerful answer to the puzzle that stumped philosophers for so long.
So now, let's take all these big ideas and pull them into the real world. Because let's be honest, we don't form our beliefs in some kind of philosophical vacuum. We live in a messy, complicated, social world, and that changes everything. I mean, for as long as humans have been around, we've relied on what other people tell us. Testimony. It's a deep, deep part of who we are. We build trust, we share information, we learn from each other to survive. It's how we function. But today, that ancient system of trust is under an insane amount of pressure. We are just bombarded with information from thousands of sources online, and it can feel almost impossible to figure out which sources, which processes are actually reliable. The question of justification has never felt more urgent. And here's why all this philosophy stuff really matters. Our brains basically evolved to use process reliabilism within small groups. We can keep track of who's trustworthy and who isn't for about, say, 150 people. But online, we get information from thousands of people we barely know, these weak ties. Our internal reliability checking machine just gets completely overwhelmed. So what do? We often fall back on a shaky version of coherentism. We trust things that just feel right or that fit with what we already believe, creating these echo chambers where we mistake popularity for truth. So I'll leave you with this question. What does your own knowledge look like? Is it a fortress built on a solid foundation? Is it an interconnected web of beliefs? Or is it a machine that you trust to produce truth? And maybe more importantly, in a world that's overflowing with information, which of those models do you think is safest to rely on?